Ethan Carter's world changed in a single moment. Rain pounded the glass as he stood motionless, reading the message glowing on his phone. His brother, Daniel, whom he trusted more than anyone, had disappeared, leaving behind only a single line, "You were never meant to know." Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. The words echoed louder than the thunder rolling outside. Betrayal flooded his veins, sharp and electric. He clenched the phone so tightly, his knuckles whitened, breath caught between disbelief and grief. Lightning flashed, throwing wild shadows across the walls. He heard his mother's voice in his memory, whispering comfort on nights when nightmares stole his sleep. Now the comfort was gone, replaced by a silence that swallowed him whole. Ethan stumbled backward, knocking a framed photo to the floor. Glass shattered, the image of him and Daniel on a sunlit hike fractured by new cracks. He dropped to his knees, fingers trembling as he tried to fit the pieces back together. His chest ached with a loneliness he'd never known. Ethan said, "Why would you do this to me?" But no one answered. The rain pressed harder, blurring the world beyond his window. Somewhere he could hear the echo of Daniel's laughter, now a ghost in the storm. Ethan whispered, "Was it all a lie?" The ache in his voice mingled with the howl of wind. Outside, the trees bent under the weight of the tempest, and Ethan felt himself unravel. He was utterly alone, the first cracks of his soul laid bare in the storm's relentless fury. Ethan's body felt impossibly heavy as he slowly rose from the shattered glass. The world seemed to move in slow motion around him. His mind replayed Daniel's words over and over, each syllable carving deeper into his memory. He reached out for the chair by the window, gripping it for support. Thunder rolled above the house, and every boom rattled the pain inside his chest. Ethan said, "I trusted you more than anyone." The ache in his voice lingered in the silent room. He could still hear laughter from happier times, echoing faintly in his memory, mingling with the storm outside. Ethan's eyes drifted to the photo's fragments clutched in his hand. Tawa. He studied the cracks running across Daniel's smile, a cruel mirror of the wounds inside himself. He felt the weight of every lie, every moment he believed in something that had now been ripped away. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and the faint tang of blood from his palm. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cold window glass, searching for answers beyond the darkness. The night swallowed his reflection. For the first time in years, he realized he had no idea who he really was. Ethan whispered, "Maybe I never did." His breath fogged the glass, blurring the world beyond, as the rain fell harder. Ethan drifted through the house, each step heavy, his mind swirling with fractured memories. The room seemed emptier than ever, every shadow deeper, every sound sharper. He wandered into the kitchen, still holding the cracked photo. The ticking clock was thunderous in the silence. Ethan stared at his own reflection in the window. The man he saw almost unrecognizable. He remembered Daniel's laughter, how they once shared secrets late into the night, the bond that felt unbreakable. Now, the only thing unbreakable was the silence that separated them. Ethan said, "You promised you'd never leave." The words fell flat, lost in the echo of the empty house. The ache in his voice was raw, edged with disbelief. He ran a shaky hand through his hair, his face drawn, eyes red from unshed tears. The rain outside masked the sound of his pain. Ethan pressed the photo to his chest, desperate for some sense of comfort, but it only deepened the ache. Each breath felt like a struggle, the air thick with regret. For a moment, Ethan let himself sink to the cold kitchen floor, eyes squeezed shut as the storm raged on beyond the glass. Ethan's hands shook as he fumbled for the light switch, bathing the kitchen in harsh fluorescence. The sharp glare revealed every line of exhaustion on his face, every worry etched deep. He stared at his hands, smeared with blood and dust, unable to stop reliving Daniel's words. The silence was relentless. He poured a glass of water, but it trembled in his grasp, splashing over the rim. Ethan said, "What secret was worth tearing us apart?" He drank, hoping for clarity, but the emptiness only grew. The refrigerator's hum filled the air, steady and cold. Ethan's gaze locked onto the family photo taped to the fridge, Daniel's smile bright and careless beside him, their mother's arm draped over their shoulders. The contrast between past joy and present pain felt unbearable. He rested his head against the cold fridge door, eyes stinging with unshed tears. His voice barely above a whisper, Ethan said, "How do I go on from here?" The world seemed suspended, as if waiting for an answer that would never come. Ethan wandered back to the living room, his movements slow and uncertain. Rain still hammered the windows, wind howling through gaps in the frame. The house felt cavernous, every familiar object now a stranger. He dropped onto the couch, letting his body sink into the cushions, the broken photo still clutched in his hand. The room was bathed in dim gold from the lamp, shadows dancing across the walls. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of solitude press down on him. Memories flickered behind his eyelids, childhood adventures, whispered secrets, a promise of brotherhood that now felt like a lie. His jaw clenched as tears slid silently down his cheeks. Ethan whispered, "I'm still here, even if you're gone." The words hung in the air, unanswered. The storm outside battered the world, but inside, only silence remained. Ethan drifted into uneasy sleep, sorrow and confusion his only companions as Act 1 came to a haunting close. Morning crept in through rain-streaked windows, painting the living room in pale gray light. Ethan Carter awoke on the couch, his body stiff and cold, the broken photo pressed to his chest like a fragile talisman. The storm had passed, but the ache inside him remained as heavy as ever. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, trying to shake the fog of grief and sleeplessness. For a moment he stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of a world waking up. Ethan stood and wandered to the window, watching dew collect on trembling leaves outside. He remembered the nights he and Daniel would sneak out at dawn to see who could run barefoot fastest across the wet grass, both of them laughing until the sun rose. Now, only silence answered him. Ethan whispered, "Daniel, if you're out there, give me a sign." His voice trembled, swallowed by the hush of morning. He scanned the horizon, desperate for something, anything that would make sense of the pain. But all he saw was his own reflection, hollow-eyed, searching for hope that felt impossibly far away. Ethan stumbled into the bathroom, bracing himself over the sink, the cold porcelain grounding him in the present. He splashed water on his face, staring at the man in the mirror. A stranger with sunken eyes, days-old stubble, and grief written deep in the lines around his mouth. He tried to remember the last time he'd felt whole, but every memory was tangled with Daniel's absence. Ethan said, "How do I start over?" His words echoed against tile and glass. The weight of his brother's secret pressed into his chest like a stone. He thought about the day Daniel taught him to shave, both of them laughing as shaving cream smeared across their faces, the bathroom echoing with easy joy. Now, the silence was absolute. Ethan gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white, breath shaky. He wiped steam from the mirror and forced himself to meet his own gaze. In the quiet, he resolved to find out the truth, whatever it might cost. Ethan said, "I have to know. I can't live in this shadow forever." He straightened his shoulders, determination flickering in his tired eyes. After dressing in silence, Ethan stepped outside, greeted by the chill of post-storm air and the scent of wet earth. The world felt raw and cleansed, birds hesitantly singing from tangled branches. He walked the overgrown path behind the house, dew soaking his boots, mind swirling with memories and regrets. Ethan's gaze drifted to the woods at the edge of the yard, where he and Daniel once played, building forts and making promises to keep each other safe. He hesitated, staring into the shifting shadows beneath the trees. Ethan whispered, "If you wanted to protect me, why did you leave me in the dark?" His question vanished into the morning mist. The air was alive with possibility and pain. He clenched the broken photo in his pocket, heart pounding, as if the answers might be waiting out there in the wild places they once called their own. Ethan lingered at the edge of the woods, memory colliding with reality. He closed his eyes and remembered laughter, echoing through sun-dappled leaves, Daniel's voice calling him deeper into adventure. Now, silence claimed the trees. Ethan reached out, fingers brushing rough bark, grounding himself. He wondered how many secrets these woods had witnessed, how many promises now lay buried in their shadows. Ethan said, "Every path leads somewhere, maybe even to the truth." He took a shaky breath, gathering courage. The stillness was profound, broken only by the distant call of a mourning dove. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the forest would offer a sign. But all that came was wind, rustling branches, and the ache of memory pressing closer with every heartbeat. Ethan stepped forward into the woods, the hush beneath the trees wrapping around him like a shroud. Every footfall cracked twigs and sent birds fluttering away, startled by his intrusion. Sunlight filtered through tangled branches in thin, shifting shafts. With each step, Ethan felt the weight of the outside world fall away, replaced by old fears and a strange, stubborn hope. He pressed the broken photo tighter in his pocket, the jagged edge reminding him of all he'd lost. Ethan whispered, "Whatever you were hiding, Daniel, I'll find it." The woods seemed to breathe around him, alive with secrets and stories, the promise of revelation heavy in the air. Ethan moved deeper, determination slowly steadying his trembling hands. The journey for answers finally begun. Ethan pressed deeper into the woods, each step an act of defiance against the pain still echoing through him. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, birds silent as if the forest itself was holding its breath. His boots sank into moss, leaving shallow imprints behind. Branches clawed at his jacket, reminding him of games he and Daniel played as children, racing through the trees, fearless and alive. Now, every rustle sent shivers up his spine. Ethan paused by a fallen log, breath-catching, memories surfacing of Daniel carving initials into the bark with a pocket knife. He brushed his hand over the faded marks, a bittersweet smile flickering across his face. Ethan said, "I still remember the promises we made right here." His voice was raw, threaded with longing and regret. A squirrel darted through the underbrush, vanishing in an instant. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling his face in shifting gold. For a heartbeat, Ethan felt both hunted and protected by the silence. Every sense was alive, the ache of loss mingling with hope. He whispered, "Please, let me find the truth." Ethan wandered further, his fingers tracing patterns on rough bark as he moved between ancient trees. The hush of the forest was broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath his boots and the distant call of a jay. He remembered how Daniel once told him that every tree held secrets, every stone hid a story. Now, Ethan searched for meaning in the smallest things, a feather, a footprint, a twist of vine. His thoughts churned, guilt and longing competing in his chest. He stumbled over tangled roots, steadying himself on a sapling, breath ragged. He realized he was afraid, not just of what he might find, but of never finding it at all. Ethan said, "You never let me in, did you, Daniel?" The words fell flat in the quiet. He looked upward, sunlight slicing through branches, painting his face with hope and shadow. With each uncertain step, Ethan felt the tension between holding on and letting go. The woods grew denser, light shifting as clouds drifted across the sky. Ethan came upon a narrow creek, water tumbling over stones with a gentle urgency. He knelt by the edge, watching sunlight dance on the ripples, the rhythm oddly soothing. He remembered Daniel teaching him to skip stones here, their laughter echoing through the trees, their bond as steady as the flowing water. Now the current whispered of distance and change. Ethan picked up a flat rock, turning it in his palm. He studied his reflection in the water, haunted by questions that refused to be answered. Ethan said, "Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" His voice blended with the bubbling stream. He tossed the stone, watching it skip twice before vanishing. The ripples spread outward, breaking the image of his face. For a moment, Ethan let himself feel the weight of all he had lost and the stubborn hope that answers waited just ahead. As Ethan crossed the creek, the sound of rushing water faded, replaced by the muted thrum of wind in the trees. He moved uphill, heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The path narrowed, overgrown with brambles and ferns. Ethan's jeans snagged, but he pressed on, determined not to turn back. He remembered Daniel's daring, how he always led the way, challenging Ethan to keep up, to face his fears. Now, Ethan led himself deeper, every step an act of courage. He stumbled on a hidden root, falling hard, breath knocked out. He lay still, staring up at the branches, light flickering between leaves. Ethan said, "I'm not giving up on you. I'm not giving up on me." He forced himself up, brushing dirt from his hands, resolve steeling his spine. The forest pressed in close, shadows shifting, the promise of discovery pulling him onward. The climb brought Ethan to a clearing, bathed in sharp morning light. He stood at the edge, breathless. The sudden openness a shock after the forest's close embrace. Wild flowers bent in the breeze, dew sparkling on every petal. Ethan paused, letting the beauty wash over him. In the middle of the clearing, a weathered stump stood, initials carved deep, EASC, a testament to childhood loyalty. He walked forward, fingers trembling as he touched the carving. Memories surged, raw and vivid, Daniel's voice promising forever. Ethan said, "This is where we began. Maybe this is where I'll find my answer." The wind picked up, scattering petals across the grass. Ethan felt the ache of loss give way, just for a moment, to gratitude for what was real. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply, ready to face whatever came next, the journey far from over. Ethan lingered in the clearing, heart pounding as the morning wind grew restless. The air felt charged, almost electric, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. He ran his thumb over the initials carved into the stump, the grooves rough beneath his skin. Suddenly, a faint glimmer caught his eye, a folded piece of paper wedged deep within the bark, hidden beneath moss. Ethan's hands shook as he pulled it free, every muscle tense with anticipation and fear. He unfolded the note, Daniel's handwriting instantly recognizable. "I did it to protect you. Some truths hurt more than silence. Forgive me if you can." The words blurred as tears welled in Ethan's eyes. He gripped the note, knuckles white, a rush of anger and relief flooding him. Ethan said, "Protect me from what, Daniel? Why hide this from me?" His voice cracked, loud in the hush. The clearing seemed to close in around him, wildflowers nodding in the rising breeze. The burden of not knowing grew heavier, but now Ethan understood. Answers lay just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of love and pain. The words from Daniel's note echoed inside Ethan, each sentence a puzzle piece refusing to fit. He stood, clutching the paper, mind racing with possibilities and regrets. Sunlight sharpened the edges of the clearing, casting dramatic shadows that danced as the wind picked up. Ethan wandered to the far side of the meadow, scanning for any other clue, something, anything that could unravel the truth. He recalled moments when Daniel seemed distant, eyes clouded by secrets he never shared. Ethan's voice wavered as he said, "I can't forgive what I don't understand." He knelt by a patch of flattened grass, noticing a worn key half buried in the earth. Heart quickening, he dug it out, soil staining his fingers. The cold metal felt heavy with meaning. Ethan gazed at the key, hope flickering. The forest seemed to urge him on, the path forward, hidden but unmistakable. Whatever secret Daniel kept, Ethan vowed to face it, no matter the cost. Ethan paced the clearing, fingers closing tightly around the key, mind spinning with questions. His gaze fell on an old wooden chest, half concealed by undergrowth at the base of a sprawling oak, a relic from their childhood adventures, now real and foreboding. Kneeling before the chest, Ethan brushed away moss and dirt, heart pounding with each breath. He hesitated, fear and hope warring within. The key fit the lock perfectly, a click echoing through the hush. Ethan lifted the lid, revealing bundles of letters, a faded photograph of Daniel and a stranger, and a worn leather journal. His hands trembled as he lifted the journal, the smell of old paper mingling with the scent of moss and earth. Ethan said, "What did you want me to find, Daniel?" The clearing felt sacred, a place where truth could finally take root. With a deep breath, Ethan opened the journal, the secrets of a lifetime waiting within its pages. The pages of the journal trembled in Ethan's hands as he turned them, eyes scanning Daniel's careful script. Every entry was a window into his brother's mind, fears, regrets, confessions he never dared to speak aloud. Stories of their childhood mingled with darker truths. A long-held family secret, a promise Daniel made to someone Ethan never knew. One passage stood out, written in shaky ink. "I thought I could spare you, but the cost was too high. You deserve to know." Ethan's breath caught, pain and gratitude twisting inside him. He clutched the journal, feeling the weight of every word. The truth was more complicated than he'd ever imagined, full of love and betrayal, sacrifice and longing. Ethan said, "All this time I blamed you for leaving, but you were just trying to shield me." Tears finally fell, silent and unstoppable, as sunlight shimmered across the open pages. Ethan remained in the clearing, journal cradled against his chest, head bowed beneath the rising sun. The ache of not knowing had finally given way to a raw, new understanding. Daniel's secret was not a betrayal, but a desperate act of love, a flawed attempt to protect what mattered most. The silence around Ethan softened, no longer a cage but a gentle companion. He breathed deeply, the scent of wildflowers and earth grounding him in the present. For the first time he let go of his anger, letting forgiveness bloom alongside the sorrow. Ethan whispered, "Thank you for loving me, even when it hurt." The woods stirred in quiet approval, birds calling out as if to mark this moment of release. Ethan looked skyward, a single tear tracing his cheek, ready to step forward into whatever came next, the weight of the past finally laid to rest. Ethan rose slowly from the clearing, clutching the journal close, the morning sun painting his face in bands of golden shadow. His breath came steady now, the air cool on his cheeks, but his heart raced as if he stood on the edge of something vast. Every memory with Daniel replayed through his mind, childhood laughter, harsh arguments, the silent spaces they could never fill. The weight of forgiveness pressed on his chest, heavy yet strangely liberating. Ethan said, "I have to choose what to do with this truth." He scanned the wild beauty of the woods, hearing in every birdsong a whisper of hope. For a moment he doubted himself. Could he really move on, knowing everything had changed? Yet the wind tugged at his jacket, urging him forward. Ethan tucked the journal safely into his bag, squared his shoulders, and stepped out of the light-dappled clearing, resolve glinting in his weary eyes. A new chapter was beginning, though the past would always walk beside him. Walking back along the overgrown trail, Ethan felt the world had subtly shifted. The air vibrated with possibility, every leaf brighter, every sound clearer. Yet his steps were slow, burdened by what he had uncovered. He paused where the woods thinned and gazed across the open field, sunlight glinting off dew-laden grass. Ethan's mind swirled with questions. What would he do with the secrets Daniel left behind? Could he bear the responsibility of truth? He pressed his palm to his chest, feeling the rhythm of his own heartbeat, the steady promise of life moving forward. Ethan whispered, "I can't change the past, but I can shape what comes next." A gentle wind swept the field, carrying with it the scent of earth and wildflowers. Ethan's shoulders loosened. He allowed himself the smallest hopeful smile, ready to face the world beyond the trees. Ethan returned home, the walk longer than he remembered, each step grounding him in the present. He paused outside the familiar front door, the house silent, waiting. For the first time, he was unafraid of what the quiet held. Stepping inside, he set the journal on the kitchen table, its presence weighty and real. The air hummed with old echoes, Daniel's laughter, his mother's lullabies, arguments that once left scars. Ethan opened the curtains, letting in a wash of golden sunlight, illuminating the dust motes swirling through the air. He ran his hand across the battered table, remembering family dinners and lost conversations. Ethan said, "I'm still here, I survived." His voice didn't tremble. The pain would not vanish, but neither would his will to begin again. Hope flickered in the spaces grief once claimed, and Ethan allowed himself to breathe it in. With trembling hands, Ethan dialed his mother's number, his heart pounding, uncertain how to begin. The phone rang, each tone stretching the moment. When her voice answered, soft and cautious, Ethan's chest tightened. He spoke quietly, sharing what he had found in the woods, Daniel's note, the journal, the truth long hidden. His mother listened, her silence a cushion for his words. Tears welled as she confessed her own regrets, the burdens she had carried. Together, their conversation was raw and honest, wounds reopened but also beginning to heal. Ethan said, "We can't run from the truth anymore, Mom." His voice trembled with both sorrow and strength. All ended with a promise. They would face what remained together. For the first time, Ethan felt the loneliness inside him lessen, replaced by a fragile shared hope. As sunlight crept higher, Ethan stood before the living room window, journal in hand, watching the world wake. The pain had not vanished, but it was no longer a cage. He remembered Daniel not only for the secrets, but for the laughter and loyalty that shaped his life. Ethan opened the journal one last time, letting the wind turn its pages, words fluttering like a final blessing. He pressed his forehead to the glass, whispering, "Thank you for the love, Daniel. I'll carry it forward." The room felt lighter, the burden of grief finally softened by acceptance. Outside, the day was bright with new promise. Ethan's reflection in the window showed a man remade by loss and courage, finally ready to step into the life awaiting him. Ethan woke early, sunlight streaming through the cracks in his curtains. The house was quiet, the air inside cleansed by the storm, and his long night of reckoning. He rose slowly, stretching muscles sore from days spent wandering woods and wrestling old ghosts. The journal sat on the table, pages splayed as if inviting one more look. Ethan's fingers traced its spine, gratitude mingling with sadness. He knew now the shape of Daniel's pain, the weight of what had been hidden for so long. Ethan made coffee, the ritual grounding him in this new chapter. He sipped in silence, every sense alive to the hush and warmth that filled the kitchen. "I'm still healing," Ethan murmured, voice steady. The pain was real, but so was his courage. For the first time, he stepped outside, not as the boy searching for answers, but as a man prepared to live with what he'd found. The sky was clear, a promise that he too could begin again. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the cool breeze brushing against his face, carrying the scent of wet grass and wildflowers. The world outside felt new, as if the landscape itself recognized his transformation. He walked barefoot onto the dewy lawn, each step an act of release. Sunlight sparkled in every droplet, painting the yard in diamonds. He closed his eyes, breathing in deeply, feeling the pain loosen its hold. Ethan said, "Daniel, wherever you are, I hope you're free too." He meant it. The bitterness had faded, replaced by something gentler, acceptance. The wind played with his hair, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan allowed himself a quiet smile. He belonged to this morning, to the gentle hope that maybe, just maybe, the years ahead could be shaped by love rather than loss. Inside, Ethan gathered his things, packing away remnants of a story finally understood. The house felt lighter, the walls echoing with new silence, one filled with possibility, not dread. He collected family photos, setting them carefully in a box. He paused at the fridge, hand resting on the old snapshot of himself and Daniel, torn but mended with tape. He smiled, touched by memory, but no longer captive to it. Ethan whispered, "Thank you for shaping me, Daniel." The past would always live here, but it no longer controlled him. He loaded the last box into his car, keys jingling in his palm, ready to step into a world remade by grief and hope. The sun glinted off the windshield as he paused to look back, not in longing, but in gratitude for everything that brought him to this point. Ethan drove away from the house, windows down, letting the wind rush through and fill the car with the scent of summer. Each mile put distance between him and the pain that once held him captive, but he did not feel like he was running. Instead, he carried Daniel's story as a companion, not a burden. The road curved through green hills and open fields, sunlight flashing on the dashboard. Ethan's hand drummed the steering wheel, music humming low from the radio, a new rhythm marking the beginning of a different life. "We carry each other forward," Ethan said softly. In the rearview mirror, his childhood home grew small, but the world ahead seemed wide and open. There was sadness in letting go, but also a quiet thrill at what waited beyond the horizon. Ethan parked beside a quiet lake, water mirroring the sky, in calm blue silence. He stepped out carrying the journal, and walked to the shore where sunlight shimmered on gentle ripples. Sitting in the grass, he opened the journal, reading a final entry aloud. The words were Daniel's, but they felt like his own now. A plea for forgiveness, a promise of love that endures beyond loss. Ethan closed the journal and set it beside him, watching dragonflies skim the water. He let the peace of the place fill him, every ache and scar dissolving in the hush. "This is where I begin again," Ethan whispered, voice firm. The world was quiet, but inside, a new chapter pulsed with hope. He closed his eyes, breathing in freedom, finally ready to meet the day. The afternoon sun drifted high as Ethan lingered by the lakeshore, his reflection rippling in gentle waves. For the first time in weeks, his heart beat without heaviness. The pain of loss remained, but it no longer dictated his every breath. He stood slowly, brushing grass from his jeans, eyes fixed on the far horizon. In the distance, a pair of swans glided across the water, graceful, unhurried. Ethan smiled, sensing his journey had led him not to closure, but to acceptance. He whispered, "I'm ready, Daniel. I'm finally ready to live." The lake answered in silence, peace radiating from its stillness. He felt the pulse of the earth beneath his feet, a grounding presence reminding him that every ending carried the seed of a new beginning. Ethan inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with hope and sunlight, his spirit lighter than it had been in years. Ethan gathered the journal, turning its worn pages one final time, letting his fingers linger on Daniel's words. They were no longer just confessions, but a bridge between brothers, one present, one gone. Ethan felt the truth settle inside him, bittersweet but necessary. He knelt at the water's edge and dipped his hand into the cool lake, watching ripples fan outward. "Thank you for loving me enough to hide the hardest things," Ethan murmured, his voice steady, tears catching in sunlight. He didn't need all the answers anymore. What mattered was the journey, the love beneath the secrets. For a long moment, he sat in silence, listening to the gentle hush of wind in reeds and distant calls of birds overhead. Here, surrounded by memory and promise, Ethan allowed himself to grieve one last time, then let that grief drift away with the ripples. The day turned golden as Ethan wandered along the shoreline, journal tucked beneath his arm, every footstep light and sure. The grief that once weighed him down now felt like a memory, real but no longer consuming. He stopped beneath a willow tree, its branches trailing the surface of the lake, casting lacy shadows. Ethan leaned against the trunk, the bark solid against his back, and looked upward through trembling leaves. He remembered laughter, storms, the echo of promises once made and broken. The world was impossibly wide and new. "This is what it means to come home to yourself," Ethan whispered, voice filled with awe. For the first time, he felt Daniel's absence as a quiet blessing, not a wound. The wind lifted, carrying the scent of water and wildflowers, and Ethan let himself rest, fully present, heart open to whatever might come. Ethan sat at the base of the willow as twilight began to settle, lake waters turning to polished silver. He closed the journal gently, hands steady, and watched as the world softened into evening. Crickets began their song, and a hush fell over the water. Ethan reflected on every hardship, every joy, and saw them as threads in the tapestry of his life, woven by love, tested by pain, redeemed by forgiveness. He understood that moving forward didn't mean forgetting, but carrying the past with grace. Ethan spoke softly, "Daniel, your story lives in me now. I'll carry it with honor." The air vibrated with quiet purpose, stars emerging one by one. In the gathering dusk, Ethan knew he would never be the same. and he was finally at peace with that truth. Night enveloped the lake, the world shimmering in silence and starlight. Ethan stood once more at the water's edge, feeling the pull of everything he had lost and everything he had found. He let the journal rest on a flat stone, a silent tribute to all that remained unsaid. Above, the sky stretched limitless and wild, a canvas for new dreams. Ethan whispered, "Some truths never end, they only change us." The words echoed, rippling across the surface, carrying Daniel's memory forward. As the wind rustled through tall grasses, Ethan's silhouette stood framed by moonlight, strong, vulnerable, and wholly alive. The journey was not over, but for the first time he walked onward unburdened, carrying the story of love, loss, and healing within him, a light no darkness could extinguish.